You being the attractive woman on that show, are you allowed to go outside your apartment, or is it dangerous? Are they just...
We don't have apartments.
You know...
She was once ranked among the sexiest women alive. She carried a billion-dollar science fiction franchise on her shoulders. And then, at the height of her fame, she simply stopped showing up. No reality show, no tabloid meltdown, no dramatic farewell tour. One day she was everywhere, and then she wasn't. So what actually happened to Jolene Blalock, the actress behind Subcommander T'Pol? When Star Trek Enterprise landed on television in September 2001, the franchise was walking a tightrope. 3 straight series before it, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, had run for a combined 15 years, and audiences were starting to feel the fatigue of shiny starships and tidy technological solutions. So the producers made a bold choice. They pushed the timeline back a full century before Captain Kirk, before the Federation even existed, and told the story of humanity's clumsy, uncertain first steps into deep space. It needed a character who could represent everything humans were not yet: composed, logical, and unshaken. That job fell to a Vulcan first officer named T'Pol, and the actress cast to play her was a former international model with almost no science fiction pedigree, Jolene Blalock. Taking on a Vulcan role was never going to be easy. Ever since Leonard Nimoy created Spock in the 1960s, Vulcans had become the emotional backbone of the entire Star Trek universe, and fans knew every detail of how that restraint was supposed to look and sound. Get it wrong, and you'd either come across as a stiff, lifeless prop, or you'd break the illusion entirely by showing too much feeling. Blalock found a narrow space in between. She played T'Pol with a controlled tension, someone who was clearly working, moment to moment, to process and tolerate the erratic humans surrounding her, without ever fully losing her composure. Alongside Scott Bakula's impulsive, warm-hearted Captain Archer, T'Pol became the emotional anchor of the show, the contrast that made the entire premise work. Audiences and critics responded immediately. She became the breakout star of the series, and her performance eventually earned her a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actress on television. But that breakout status came with a price tag most young actresses in the early 2000s were forced to pay. The network behind Enterprise, UPN, was chasing younger audiences aggressively, and it leaned hard into marketing Blalock's looks rather than her acting range. She was suddenly plastered across the covers of men's magazines, named among the most beautiful women in the world, and dressed on screen in skin-tight uniforms that had nothing to do with practical Starfleet gear. The show also became known for its so-called decontamination chamber scenes, moments where crew members stripped down and rubbed gel on each other under blue lighting, technically justified by the plot, but obviously engineered for a very different kind of viewer attention. Blalock was open about her frustration with this. In interviews at the time, she pushed back on the idea that her character's value lay in a tight costume rather than in the writing, and she argued that T'Pol's real strength was her intellect and her quiet endurance, not how the camera framed her body. Despite the studio's instincts, she managed to build a character with genuine depth across 4 seasons, weaving in an addiction storyline, cultural prejudice, grief, and the slow unraveling of a lifetime of suppressed emotion. Enterprise ran for 4 seasons before UPN canceled it in 2005, which also quietly closed out an 18-year unbroken run of Star Trek on television. For Blalock, the ending wasn't just the end of a job. It also gave her a rare kind of clarity about what she did and did not want from the entertainment industry going forward. She had strong feelings about how the show wrapped up. The series finale, These Are the Voyages, framed the entire Enterprise story as a holodeck simulation being watched years later by characters from the Next Generation, and in doing so it sidelined the actual cast in their own farewell episode, while abruptly resolving major relationships, including the long-running arc between T'Pol and engineer Trip Tucker. Blalock didn't stay quiet about it. In press interviews at the time, she was openly critical of how the finale was handled, arguing that it shortchanged both the cast and the fans who had spent 4 years invested in these characters. That kind of candor was unusual for an actor at that stage of a major franchise, and it hinted at something important about her. She was never someone who was going to play the industry's usual game of polite silence. After Enterprise ended, Blalock didn't disappear from acting entirely, But she stepped back from the relentless grind that usually follows a canceled network lead role, chasing pilot season after pilot season for the next steady paycheck. Instead, she picked her projects selectively. She showed up on Stargate SG-1 as Ishta, the leader of a group of Jaffa warriors fighting for their freedom, a role that let her flex a much more physical, commanding energy than T'Pol ever allowed. She guest starred on CSI, Miami, and later on House, playing a patient named Lexa in a Season 6 episode. She took a villainous, recurring turn as Sister Nikki on the fantasy series Legend of the Seeker. On the film side, she moved toward darker, grittier material, co-starring with Ray Liotta in the 2005 crime thriller Slow Burn, and she leaned back into genre work in 2008, playing Captain Lola Beck in Starship Troopers 3, Marauder, putting her back in a military sci-fi command role that cult fans of the franchise still bring up fondly. She also appeared in smaller films like Shadow Puppets and Sinners and Saints, and made a brief cameo in the 2014 comedy Sex Tape. One of her more self-aware moments on screen came in 2009, in an episode of the short-lived comedy series 10 Items or Less, where she played an exaggerated, parody version of herself attending a sci-fi convention, a role that showed she wasn't precious about her own pop culture image and could poke fun at it herself. Her last credited acting role, for a long stretch, came in 2017, in a television movie called A Man for Every Month. After that, she largely stepped away from the screen. What's notable is that Blalock also mostly avoided the Star Trek convention circuit, which for most franchise alumni is one of the most dependable sources of income and attention long after a show ends. She wasn't a frequent presence at fan events in the years following Enterprise's cancellation, a choice that stood out given how active many of her former co-stars remained in that world. To understand why she felt so little pull back toward Hollywood, you have to look at what was happening in her personal life at exactly the same time her television career was peaking. While filming the second season of Enterprise, Blalock met Michael Rapino, a Canadian-born music industry executive who was living and working in England at the time. Their early relationship played out mostly long distance, with Blalock later joking about how astronomical their phone bills got trying to keep up a transatlantic courtship while she was shooting a demanding weekly television series. In April 2003, while on a family vacation to Negril, Jamaica, Blalock decided she wasn't going to wait around, and she proposed to Rapino herself. They were married the very next day, in a private beach ceremony with a small group of family present. Not long after Enterprise wrapped, Rapino's career took off in a massive way. He went on to become the chief executive officer of Live Nation Entertainment, eventually turning it into one of the largest live event and ticketing companies in the world. That put Blalock and Rapino in a very different kind of spotlight than the one she'd known on a soundstage. But unlike a lot of celebrity couples who lean into that visibility, the two of them have kept an unusually private, low-key family life over the past 2 decades. They have 3 sons together, Ryder, River, and Rexton, born between 2010 and 2014, and by most accounts, raising them has been where Blalock has put the bulk of her energy and attention since Enterprise ended. Family life wasn't the only thing that filled the space where a Hollywood career used to be. Blalock and Rapino also became involved in philanthropic work together, most notably through what became known as the Rapino Foundation, later evolving into an initiative called Our Three Volve Haiti, focused on supporting Haitian communities and giving local voices a platform through music and film projects, rather than simply handing out aid from the outside. She's also been connected to other charitable causes over the years, including organizations focused on animal welfare. None of this generated the kind of headlines her Maxim covers used to, but it points to where her actual priorities landed once she had the financial freedom to choose them for herself. That financial freedom is really the through line of this whole story. Most actors leaving a canceled network lead role don't have the luxury of simply walking away. They have mortgages, they have agents pushing them toward whatever pays, and they often end up cycling through years of forgettable guest spots just to stay employed. Blalock, married to a rising entertainment executive with a stable, growing family of her own, had the rare option to say no to projects that didn't genuinely interest her, and she used that option freely. It's less a story of an actress being pushed out by an unforgiving industry, and more a story of someone who looked at the machine decided she'd gotten what she wanted out of it, and chose something else. Over the last several years, something interesting has happened to how people talk about T'Pol and about Enterprise as a whole. When the show first aired, it was constantly compared, often unfavorably, to the Star Trek series that came before it, and the network's marketing choices around Blalock's character didn't do the show's reputation any favors with longtime fans. But streaming changed a lot of that. Once Enterprise became easy to find on platforms like Paramount+, a new generation of viewers who weren't around for the original network politics and forum arguments discovered the show fresh, and a lot of them came away with real appreciation for what it was trying to do. The Season 3 storyline following a terrorist attack on Earth and Season 4's deep dive into Vulcan history and the origins of the Federation are now frequently cited by fans and critics as some of the most ambitious writing in the franchise's history, work that arguably laid groundwork for later shows like Strange New Worlds. And at the center of almost all of it is T'Pol, a performance that's aged into something closer to universal respect than the divided reaction it got in 2001. Blalock herself has shown up occasionally to acknowledge that legacy, on her own terms and in small doses. In September 2021, she made a surprise appearance at Paramount's official Star Trek Day celebration in Los Angeles, walking alongside former castmates for the first time in years. Then, in 2024, she made a genuinely unexpected return to the franchise, lending her voice to an alternate universe version of T'Pol in an episode of the animated series Star Trek Lower Decks, credited simply as Jolene. For longtime fans, it read less like a comeback and more like a quiet, affectionate nod, a way of saying she remembered exactly what that character meant to people, even from a distance. Her former castmates have generally spoken about her with a lot of warmth over the years. People like John Billingsley, who played Dr. Phlox on the series, have described her in interviews as someone who showed up prepared and professional